Number 1.
This story is not my own, but my mother's. My parents were living in a small apartment complex in Arizona while my mom was pregnant with me. The apartment was pretty much microscopic, with a very tiny kitchen, a small living room, and an even smaller bathroom. It was October of 2001, and my mom was about 7 months pregnant with me. She was at home while my dad was working, when she had gone down to the lobby to get the mail. When she got back to the apartment, she sat down and started watching TV. She began to hear deep breathing from behind her. Not even the careful type of breathing of someone trying not to be heard. She walked over to the closet by the door and discovered that there was a man hiding in it. She recognized the man immediately as the guy who lived on the floor above them. She started screaming at him to get out, while he babbled something incoherently about not turning on the news or drawing attention to the room. My mom told me the next few seconds were a blur, and she couldn't remember the specific details, but she grabbed her phone and called my dad, knowing he would get there quicker than the cops would. She put the phone on speaker and my dad started screaming at the neighbor, threatening his life, saying that he was only 5 minutes away. Well, that was enough to scare the intruder into leaving, but instead of exiting out the door, he climbed out the window and went down the fire escape. After my dad arrived home, my parents called the police. When the police showed up, they explained to my parents that the guy was a drug addict and he had gotten into trouble with some dangerous men who apparently threatened to come to his apartment to kill him. The man most likely panicked and ducked into the first apartment he found that was unlocked. Fast forward a week. During this time, my dad had been keeping an eye out for the guy all over town and in the complex, when he happened to spot him late one night in the parking lot. When the man saw him coming, he immediately started apologizing for breaking into their apartment, using the excuse that there was a couple of people trying to kill him. But my dad grabbed him and slammed him into the wall. The guy grabbed a crowbar from the back of his car to defend himself, and my dad got his gun from his car and called the cops. When the cops arrived, they explained that they could arrest the guy for breaking and entering, but that he could also press charges on Dad for assaulting him. Of course, my dad couldn't afford to go to jail since he was supporting my mom, so he had to give the guy a pass. Luckily, the guy moved away a few days later. Looking back, my mom says they were very fortunate, as there was no telling what could have happened if the people that were trying to kill our neighbor found him in our apartment, with my mom still in there.
Number 2.
My brother and I love to go hunting, and we try to go as much as we can. But after this experience, I get nervous every time I enter the woods, even with a rifle in my hand. Now, this only happened a few short weeks before hunting season was over. It was about 3 in the afternoon, and we were setting into the woods. We hiked until it began to get dark. We decided to set up camp and start a fire. After our very shitty tent had been set up, we cooked a rabbit I shot over the fire, and after a while we crawled inside our sleeping bags. My brother was dead asleep within a few minutes, but I have never really been able to fall asleep easily in the woods, and it took me a couple of hours before I finally drifted off. I was awoken to the sound of twigs snapping in the distance. I know it's cliché, but it still sent chills up my spine. I tried to blow it off. We were in a forest after all. I assumed it was just some animal, and I rolled over to go back to sleep. Then there came a faint glow of light in the distance, and I sat up and peered through one of the holes in the tent. There were a bunch of men in the distance, all wearing white robes with overlarge theater masks, and all of them held torches, chanting rhythmically. We had a camo tent, so I was fairly confident that they couldn't see us, but I wasn't prepared to bet my life on it. I shook my brother awake, and he sat upright and asked me way too loudly what the fuck I was doing. I told him to shut up and look out through the tent holes. After a few moments of silence, there came a muffled scream. And he whispered to me, "It's time to leave. Pack your shit. Forget the tent and sleeping bags." I did as he said, and he loaded his shotgun and handed me his rifle. We slowly made our way out of the tent and stayed low as we swiftly yet carefully made our way back to the truck. And fortunately, we made it back there without incident. On the drive back, we didn't speak much, but I asked him what the scream had been about. He couldn't bring himself to say anything except, "One of those guys had an axe." To this day, he still hasn't told me the rest of what happened. The following week, my brother went back out there alone during the day to retrieve whatever he could of our camping equipment. He was worried that something with our personal information could have been left behind and found by one of the cult members. From what he told me, he approached the spot very carefully, and he didn't have to get very close to the campsite to discover that the tent had been burned, and one of the sleeping bags had been impaled against a tree with an axe. As my brother turned to leave, he said he heard the faint sound of mechanical clicking, and he booked it the hell out of there. He's positive that somewhere out there right now, there's a picture of him on a trail cam memory card, returning to the campsite. I just hope the picture isn't a very good one.
Number 3.
I used to live in this small, sleepy forest town, which at the time was notorious for being the most boring place to raise a family in the Midwest. That never bothered me very much. I liked the isolation and the privacy, and the knowledge that those late-breaking violent stories you hear on the news would never involve us. I lived about a minute away from a large open field, where I could easily walk for about 15 minutes without ever having to set foot on concrete. One day last summer, I was taking my dog Oscar for a walk across the field pretty early in the morning as I usually did. But today, something happened to catch my eye immediately after I went through the fence. About 15 meters to the left of the entry gate is an old fishing pit that was surrounded by overgrown bushes with barbed wire. So I heard something rustling from the undergrowth, and I stopped to investigate. I noticed the outline of someone standing under the shadows of the trees, staring at me without moving. Completely taken aback and slightly unnerved, I decided to just keep walking my dog as if I hadn't seen anything. I usually play music on my phone, but after that chilling encounter, I had no intention of doing so, just in case that person decided to try and come at me from behind. After walking for another 15 minutes, I completed my loop around the field and was making my way back when I noticed a tall man walking from the grassy area around the fishing pit to the gate. It was hard to tell because of the distance, but I would say he was around 30 years old and well built. I made sure to keep my distance and decided to play fetch with my dog for a while and give him time to leave, as my gut feeling was telling me that it wasn't a good idea to approach him. After a short while, I made sure the coast was clear and called my dog back over to me and reattached his leash. As we were making our way out of the field through the gate where we originally entered, Oscar started pulling at his leash and sniffing around the bushes where I had first noticed the silhouette of the man. I tugged at the leash and called my dog's name, but he refused to obey, which was strange because he usually didn't give me any trouble. I walked towards him to grab his collar, nervously scanning the area again for the strange man, when I noticed a piece of blue cloth on the other side of the barbed wire divider that surrounds the fishing pit. I tied my dog to a nearby stump, carefully climbed over the fence, and went to investigate. This next part is very difficult for me to recount, because while a part of me is pleased my actions that day brought light to a violent crime and brought closure, however horrific, to someone's family, another part of me wishes I had just been less patient and kept tugging at my dog, because the nightmares have yet to stop. There was a body of a young girl covered in bruises all over her face and lacerations to her wrists. Fresh blood was pooling under the gash in her neck. Her eyes were all puffy like she had been crying for a very long time. I couldn't even begin to imagine what she had been put through. After calling the police, I sat by the gate and waited what was probably only about 8 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. Even though I obviously knew she was dead, when I overheard the ambulance attendant confirm it, I threw up all over the grass. The police tried asking me questions, and I told them what I could recall about the stranger, while my dog whined and tried to nuzzle me while I sat on the grass. A week later, I read in the newspaper that the young girl was a 12-year-old named Megan that had gone missing no more than 5 minutes away from my house. She had been sexually assaulted before being murdered. After 3 months of continuous searching, nobody matched the vague description of the man I had given the police. More than a few times, I've noticed people in my own town giving me sideways glances that feel more like suspicion than pity, and that's almost more than I can bear. Please just remember to keep things in perspective. No matter how shitty a day you're having, however many trivial inconveniences you have to endure, you were at least lucky enough not to have found a dead child while enjoying your daily routine. My thoughts and prayers go out to that poor girl's family.
Number 4.
This story is told from the point of view of a female. My husband and I live in Richmond, Virginia. About 2 weeks ago, we decided that we wanted to get season passes to King's Dominion, which is the biggest amusement park in our state. We were short on cash, and were in between paychecks, so we decided to sell some of our old things on a mobile app called Let Go, which is basically like Craigslist, where you can post items you have for sale, and it shows it to everyone within a 50-mile radius of your location. The only way Let Go is different from Craigslist is that you actually have to make an account. But no personal information is required besides your name and your general area of residence. You are also able to chat with other buyers and sellers through the messaging system on the app to keep your phone numbers anonymous. I posted my old tablet on Let Go to make up for the money we still needed to get the passes, and within a few minutes I got a message from a woman named Keisha, who was interested in making an offer. The conversation went as follows. "Hi, is the tablet still available?" "Yes, it is." "Great. Can I pick it up in 2 hours when I get off?" "Actually, I'm trying to get some King's Dominion passes today, so I can go this evening. I could drop it off to you if that's okay." "Yeah, that works. I work at the McDonald's off 9 Mile Road." "Okay, great. Can you send me the address so I can head over?" Now the conversation stopped there for a bit, after I had asked Keisha for the address to her McDonald's. She didn't respond for a while, and looking back after everything happened, it should have been a red flag. But at the time, I figured she was slow to reply because she was working. I asked my husband if he knew which McDonald's it could be, and he looked it up on Google Earth. I copied the address and messaged her back asking if it was the right address, and she responded, "Yeah, that's it. Message me when you're here, so I can tell my manager I need to run out to my car." After that, my husband and I grabbed a tablet and began the drive. We had to take the highway at rush hour, so what should have been a 20-minute drive ended up being around 40 minutes. As we were stuck in traffic, Keisha would send me several messages asking me where we were, and each time I would reply the same way, telling her that we were on our way but we were caught up in traffic. We finally arrived and parked in front of the main entrance. My husband suggested that we sit on the bed of his truck because he didn't want to make Keisha walk up to the window of a stranger's car. I agreed, and I hopped out of his truck, and he pulled down the hitch door to his bed and we took a seat. I pulled out my phone and messaged her saying that we were there. We waited for about 5 minutes staring at the door, but the only person who came was a man on a cell phone, who got into a car that was next to ours and drove off. After another few minutes, my husband and I were tired of waiting, so I checked my phone to see if I had any new messages. I looked up our conversation and discovered that Keisha had blocked me. I showed my husband and he got pissed. He told me to wait in the truck with the doors locked while he went inside and asked the manager if anybody named Keisha worked there. He took my phone with him to use as evidence of our conversation. When he came back to the truck a few minutes later, He told me that the manager said there was a girl named Keisha that worked there, but she had been sent home early because of slow customer traffic. It was in that moment that I put two and two together. The only person we saw come out of the restaurant was the man who was on the phone, who quickly got in his car next to ours and drove off. I never said anything about my husband being with me. For all they knew, I was by myself. We peeled out of the parking lot and sped back home. On our way back, I deleted the application from my phone. I know this sounds like a lot of speculation, but I'm fairly certain that I was almost the victim of a kidnapping, because there have been several cases of women in Richmond and other areas of Virginia who have used the Let Go app and have gone missing or have been robbed at gunpoint. I'm grateful that my husband came along with me, because if he didn't, there's a good chance I wouldn't be able to share this story. Keep this story in mind for the future, and as always, make sure to bring somebody with you when meeting with a stranger.
There's always a reason to be afraid.